And Diane, I'm
How
excited to be back.
I was going to say, how are you, dude?
I am hanging in there, wearing my tricorn hat, just here in New York, missing you, delighted to be back.
Well, listen, if you don't mind, I'd like to start our interview with a little joke, maybe just to keep things light.
Okay.
A famous teacher of arithmetic had long been married with...
Well, this is one of my favorite jokes. Oh, man, it is a knee slapper. Keep going.
Oh, okay. A famous teacher of arithmetic had long been married without being able to get his wife with child. Someone said to her, "Madam, your husband is an excellent arithmetician." "Yes," she replied, "only he can't multiply."
Ba-dum, boom. That is, oh, man. That is a classic. Listen. In 1789, that killed.
Yeah.
That was the funniest thing you did. That was like, I don't know, Chris Rock. That was...
Should we continue on maybe with an extended version of Yankee Doodle?
If you really want to depress listeners, sure. That would be great. Certainly not me singing it, though. Maybe Diane.
The Year of Living Constitutionally. Dude, the book's awesome. The book is fascinating to me.
Oh, thank you, Elliot. That is huge. I love it.
And so I guess the goal was, and you'll do a better job of explaining this than I will, is you wanted to go, well, I think I saw you say somewhere, AJ, where you almost can't go a day, and if you're lucky, 2 days, without something on the news popping up where there is a question or somebody trying to make an interpretation from the left, from the right, it doesn't matter, about the founding fathers and the Constitution.
Exactly. I mean, it is everywhere. And I had read a statistic that 60% of people, Americans, had never read the Constitution. And I was in that 60%. And yet I was reading all these stories about what a huge impact this 230-year-old document has on my life every day. And I thought, all right, I'm going to try to understand this. And as you know, the way I try to understand topics is to live them, to immerse myself. And that's what I did with the Year of Living Biblically, which I talked about on your delightful show. Wearing the robes, growing the beard, doing the 10 Commandments, stoning adulterers, the whole with pebbles, I should add. I didn't want to go to jail. But so I thought, let me try the same thing with the Constitution, because I need to understand it, and I want to help readers understand it. And I thought, all right, I'm going to follow it in the original way, the Founding Fathers way, using the tools and mindset of 1789. So that meant walking around the Upper West Side of New York with my musket, my 18th century musket. It meant writing the book with a quill pen. It meant quartering soldiers in my apartment in New York, and it was a wild journey, and it was absurd, as all my books are. But also, I hope it had a serious point about how should we interpret the Constitution? How literally should we take it? How frozen in time should it be, and how much should it evolve?
Hey, so real quick, I want to go back to, because you talked about the how you wrote a book with a quill and ink. And by the way, AJ's not lying. And AJ, more than anything, you may go, AJ's crazy, AJ is not a great author. You can say whatever you want, but the one thing you can't say is that AJ does not commit to a bit.
Right.
So I
do commit.
Yes. And so like you said, you wrote using a quill, you wrote using ink, and then you had like that little desk. I got to tell you, I laughed my ass off, though, when you were talking about how not only did you write the book with it, dude, you went to Chinese restaurants and signed the bill using the quill and the ink.
I did. My kids were mortified, and so they wouldn't walk within 50 yards of me. I also took it, I don't think I've mentioned, I took it to the DMV. They were getting their license, and I was a little worried. Are they going to accept it at the DMV? One clerk did not, and one clerk did, so I don't know what to tell you. If you want to bring a quill, you have to get lucky.
But so the other thing is, yes, is to try to understand what needs to change, maybe, what doesn't need to change, maybe, what's frozen, how do we interpret things. But the other part, and then, just the book's very, very funny, obviously. But then there's also like just itty bitty little factoids and itty bitty little things that you learn along the way. And like one of the first things that I think you mentioned is, and you were talking about how 60% say they've never read the Constitution, which, by the way, if I had to argue, that number is much higher. I would bet it's way higher. But you talk about how the there was an over capitalization gets used in the Constitution. You go, okay, well, that's how they wrote. But then you learn that little factoid that Ben Franklin thought every noun should be capitalized. You're like, holy crap. Again, I don't know where that's going to come in necessary for me, but what an interesting little factoid to learn.
Well, thank you. And I've started to do it. I've become an overcapitalizer. I just feel it makes the nouns more important. I also love the fact that the Constitution has typos, or I don't know what to call them, because they had spellos or quillos. I don't know. But the word Pennsylvania, the state Pennsylvania, is spelled two different ways in 4 pages. So it's spelled Penn and then just Pens. So people who say, I love the Constitution, it's an amazing document, but it was not written by gods. It was written by people, and they made mistakes. They were fallible, and they knew it. They said, this is a fallible document. This is not perfect. We've got to work to make it more perfect.
Hey, the other thing, well, I also like obviously everybody knows whether they've read it or not. It's We the People is how it starts, right? Everybody knows that. But I didn't realize, even like at the beginning, it was going to be We the People of the state of Pennsylvania.
All of the states.
And they were going to name all 13 states. But then I think you say it's Governor Morris who stepped in and was like, no. Let's just make it We the People and call it a day.
That's right. And that was huge. That one little edit was huge. And he was a great guy, by the way. A philanderer. So not like, he wasn't a great husband, but he was a great guy. And that change made the focus from a collection of states to a collection of people. And that has proved to be so important. And that we, the people, are the number one thing, not we, the states.
And I do so the book, I shouldn't say the book. You start your year of living constitutionally on what makes sense. You start on election day. And I like how you point out that back in the day, well, first of all, you've got on your stupid hat and you go to your polling place. I also like that you walk down the streets of New York and people pass you and go, "Hey, matey."
I think you're a pirate.
Oh, yeah, my tricorn hat. By the way, it may be stupid, but it was like $250.
What a waste of money.
All right, you're not getting it. When I donate it, you are not getting it.
But on election day, you walk in the same way that would have been done in the early days of the founding fathers. You walk into your polling place on the Upper West Side of New York, and as you're checking in, where most people know you just hand them, whatever your ID is or whatever you're going to do, and you get shuttled behind a screen to do it. You walk in and you go, "I would like to announce I'm voting for," and scream it at the top of your lungs. Julie,
exactly,
your wife is like, "Oh my God." But you talk about how voting used to be a celebration, and voting used to be like people had, I don't want to say parties, but people made cakes and people were happy and people celebrated. It was a day of celebration to have this freedom to go out and elect, to have a democracy, to go out and to elect somebody that was going to be a leader. Boy, it feels like we've gotten a little bit away from that, huh?
And that is one of my favorite parts of the book, is how different elections were. And you can say party. You can say festival. There were parades. There was music, farmers markets. It wasn't quite Coachella, but it was a party. And I think that we've lost that, and I want to get that back, because I think then it's not like this duty, like annoying chore to go vote. It's this amazing right that we have to cherish. And I started a movement to get people to bake election cakes all over the country and bring them to the polls. And I'm doing it again in November. If anyone wants to bake election cakes, join me. Join the Democracy is Sweet movement.
Hey, what was the when you decided that you were going to pack up the Jacobs family and drive them to Fort Lee, New Jersey, just outside of Manhattan, to take part in a Revolutionary War reenactment? What was the desire there?
Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, part of this was to figure out what's in the Constitution, how do we interpret it. Part of it was, how did they live back in the 1790s, and how different was it? And what can we learn from that? I mean, first of all, we don't want to go back to the 1790s. It was sexist, racist. It smelled. Cutting-edge medicine was a tobacco smoke enema where you literally blew smoke up someone's ass with a hose. So let's not go back. But there were parts of the 18th century that were, I think we need to reconsider, like the idea of virtue, the idea of slowing down our thinking. So I joined the New Jersey 3rd Regiment of Revolutionary War reenactors to really live as much as I could. And it was hilarious and delightful. And I fought in the Battle of Monmouth, and I died. From the redcoats shot me. I did die in the shade. It was like 100 degrees out. So I made sure I'm going to die in the shade. And so it was like a little nap. It wasn't so bad, unlike back then. But yeah, that was it was great to hang out with people who really put thought into what can we do to try to recreate this time.
And like you mentioned how we don't want to go back and live in the 1790s. And you talk about how the Constitution, like you said, wasn't written by gods. It was written by regular, I mean, albeit leaders, but flawed men. Like you said, the one guy was a philanderer. There's misspellings through the whole thing. And it was written at a time where, like you said, there's slavery, and people are enslaved, and women can't vote, and black people can't vote, and on and on and on. But I did like, and I can't remember, AJ, exactly where in the book it fell, but you talk about when the amendments start coming along, right? And there's a debate of, do we go back and take the First Amendment? Do we take the original Constitution and try to rewrite it into the existing Constitution? Or do we leave the Constitution as it is and add on the amendments at the end to show it's a work in progress? Like, we are not in 1790. I don't know where we'll be in the future, but let's not try to, I hate to use the term like whitewash the Constitution, but I thought it was really smart to go, it's okay. When we wrote this, it meant one thing, but we've learned, we've developed, we've gotten smarter. Let's just add this on to fix a mistake or something that we weren't advanced enough or smart enough to realize.
Totally. I mean, these guys were brilliant. They were like so much smarter than me, of course, but they were also, as you say, they were human. And this was fascinating. I didn't know this, but James Madison did not want the amendments tacked on at the end. James, he was considered the father of the Constitution. He wanted them to be like a Google Doc, where you basically rewrite it. You take the amendment and you rewrite the whole thing and stick in the amendment. But he was overruled. So now we've got this sort of, P.S., this also this, and don't forget that. And the advantage of that, as you say, is that we can see the progress we've made. I mean, we can see that women have gotten the vote, and black people and indigenous people have gotten the vote. So we have made progress, and there is something wonderful about that, and especially when you get so much negative news about this is the worst time in history. It's not the worst time in history. We got problems, but it is not the worst time in history.
And one of the first things you cover, obviously because of who you are and what you do for a living, is freedom of the press and the First Amendment and everything under the First Amendment, but freedom of the press. Are we better now than we were back then?
Oh, so much. You'd be in jail, Elliot. You would be rotting in a prison cell right now because their version of the First Amendment was much stricter. It was shocking to me, and this didn't come from me. This was these scholars I talked to at all these fancy schools. They point out that you were allowed to publish anything you wanted, but the government was also allowed to punish you because they felt it was such a fragile infant democracy. So there were laws against blasphemy. So you couldn't curse in New York State. They had a law, 37.5 cents every time you say the S word or F word or whatever they considered curses then. And there were sedition laws. This one guy got thrown in jail for making an ass joke about John Adams, or an arse joke, to be technical. It was an arse. He said, "I wish a cannonball would go up that guy's arse," and he was thrown in jail. So, that's where you would be.
And I know that you said that, and this is another example of, I love the little tidbits that you learn. You talked about how you went and you looked up what was the press like in 1790. What did articles look like in 1790? And that is where I learned the total side note, the great bit on the invention of the parachute.
Yeah, that was interesting. I loved reading about the newspapers, and that was in Ben Franklin's newspaper. They had a great article about the first parachute, which I guess wasn't a person. So they had put in, I think, a chicken or a goat or something, and can you imagine how confused that chicken would have been when they dropped it?
They just threw it out.
The hot air
There it goes.
Yeah. Anyway, he's like, what the hell just happened?
Hey, AJ.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you talk about how back in the day, right, that you and your sons would have both been in the state militia. Like if you lived back then, right? And now clearly that is a time that has gone by. But I do like where you get into the mindset of wondering whether or not mandatory service would do the country well. And I don't, and you do say in the book, I don't mean mandatory military service, but some kind of mandatory service for the country to give everybody kind of a shared experience.
Exactly. I mean, we don't have a real glue now, and you see that's part of the reason why we're so divided. And as you say, I don't want to go back to everyone in a militia, but maybe there's something to everyone does AmeriCorps or something, because back then there was this idea of balancing your individual rights with responsibilities, with your obligations to the community, to the country, to the world. And I love that. I think, Kennedy talked about it when he said, ask not what you can do, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I don't think a politician could get away with that right now. That people would be like, what do you mean?
Right.
You've got what? Tell me what's in it for me. I'm not here to help you, the government.
Hey, can I tell you what I am upset with you for, though?
Yeah, please do. I apologize in advance.
For doing the book, The Year of Living Constitutionally, how many times did you come to D.C. to do research?
Oh, my, I am a bad person.
Not once.
Actually,
not once. No, that's not true. Or was the Supreme Court trip?
Oh, no, you're right.
Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the fact checking.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if I had known you would take my call, I would take you to the Supreme Court in a second.
Oh, great. So I could camp out for 138 hours in hopes that Rob Reiner shows up to take my place?
I would pay you. $200.
Did you enjoy your visit to the Supreme Court?
I mean, it was fascinating. It was, first of all, like that building is just so wild. It's like going to a Roman temple. And that was one of the things that surprised me is reading the history. The founders would have been shocked by how powerful the Supreme Court is. And that building is not from the 1780s. That's from the 1930s. It just looks like the 1780s. But back then, the Supreme Court was stuck in the Capitol building, and and in the very beginning, it was like in a butcher's market. So it has become so much more powerful than the founders would ever have imagined.
Right, because didn't you say, like, back then that they would rule on things, they would hear things and then rule on things, but then those decisions were brought to, when I say the leadership, president to Senate and stuff like that, for them to go over and see whether or not, as opposed to it being the ultimate decision. And by the way, you make the same point with the president, where because we had just come out of a war, we had just broken away from a king, from a monarchy, and that was the last thing that, if you, again, trying to get into the mind of the founding fathers, is we don't want that. We want there to be checks and balances. Nobody should really have that much power over anybody.
Totally. And that was one of the most fascinating things about researching the book, was when the idea of a singular president was brought up in the Constitutional Convention, several delegates said, "Are you jesting? That's terrible. They called it the fetus of monarchy. We just tried to get rid of a king. We don't want another king." And it was debated. Finally, the single president did win. By 7 states voted for it and 3 voted against it. So 2 other states, had they voted differently, we would have a crazy different world and country. Some of them wanted 3 presidents. So, which I always think, can you imagine Biden, Trump, and RFK Jr. like co-working, like at a WeWork space in the Oval Office? That would be very interesting. I'm not sure it's a great idea, but I do think we need to constrain the power of the president, both Democrat and Republican. This is not a partisan issue. And I started a petition to do just that, to let's rethink the president, and got people to sign it with a quill pen and brought it to Washington. I'm very sorry.
There we go.
Yeah.
By the way, I also here's the tidbit out of that I like, though, is because there was a king. And so when the United States is being set up, what do we call this person? And there's this debate of, do we call him His Excellence? Do we call him His Highness? Do we call him Washington? And you point out that if it would have been, as obviously president ends up winning, right? So you're president,
right,
whatever, right? But if not, you'd say it would have been Washington Obama and Washington Clinton, and whatever. Washington would have been the name of what we just say president for.
Exactly, which would have been very bizarre. But it has happened before, because Caesar is used now, like Tsar is a derivation of Caesar. So Tsar Nicholas was basically the same as Washington Obama. But yeah, I am glad that lost, and I'm glad John Adams was big on the fancy titles, and people made fun of him. They called him His Rotundity, because he was a little pudgy. So they had fat jokes at his expense. He got a lot of jokes at his expense.
Now, I don't want you to think I only read the book, because I did also look at the pictures. My favorite picture in the book is you at the National Archives going to see the Constitution. And again, you're being brought in there to see this thing that you've dedicated a year of your life to and done more research and reading than anybody I know over the course of a year. But again, you got to show up in your stupid hat and your stupid jacket and your stupid woolen socks with the little belts around them. And this poor woman from the archives is ready to meet you. And it is the sweetest picture in the book, because you do look like you're meeting this beautiful symbol to you, but you're wearing your stupid outfit, AJ.
Listen, as you say, I got to commit to the bit. You are what you wear. There's lots on that. And listen, it was hot. Those wool coats are very hot. I will tell you, it gave me some insight. It wasn't just the crazy, stupid. It gave me some insight into life. And I'll give you one quick example. Those socks, as you say, I had to put belts on top of my socks every morning because there's no elastic. So they were made of wool, and they would just slip down. So can you imagine? I'll never get back those combined 3 hours of putting on the sock belt. So I am now so grateful for not just democracy, which is one of the main points of the book, but also elastic. I love my elastic. Thank God for elastic.
So let me get here. So here we are now. Like, we get to the end of the book, and I could go through every little part of the book, AJ. I really did love it. But so we get to this point, and we go every day. Go back to how we started, right? Every day, something will come up, and it will be somebody's interpretation. They'll say, I'm an originalist, or I'm a constitutionalist, or whatever it is. And there's no way to time travel, right? There's no way you're going to go back and really be able to sit down and ask them. How do normal people like us figure out what is somebody really, and I don't mean a founding father, but somebody who's using it as an example. What do they really mean, or what are they really trying to say? Are we just trying to stack a game, or is this something somebody really believes in?
Oh, well, I do think both sides genuinely believe. I don't think there's a lot of charlatans on both sides, but I do hope by the end of my journey, and I hope if you read the book that you'll be more empowered to figure out. When people say, oh, that's not flying a kite, that's not constitutional, you'll be able to say, now, wait a second, let's take a look at this and let's see what they meant, but also how should we interpret it? And I think a lot, as you say, we'll never figure out what the founders meant for word, but we can look at the big picture and let things like the preamble, which talks about the blessings of liberty, and the general welfare and things like equal protection under the law and the 14th Amendment. Look at the big picture, and let's try to follow that and make the Constitution, make the country live up to the best ideals of this amazing document.
Hey, last thing. Do you have your fife nearby?
In the other room. Did you want? It's very piercing. I think your listeners might not. You might turn off the radio.
I think if you put the phone down on your lap and gave me a little reveille, that would be the perfect way to wrap up.
Okay. Do you want me to run and get it?
You bet I do. You bet I do.
Okay. All right.
I'm holding.
All right. All right. I'm now. Listen. I
hope your socks aren't falling down.
You just fell down.
Yeah, you're making me run.
You live in an apartment on the Upper West Side. You ain't running anywhere.
How big is your apartment?
I know. My wife was not happy when I took my fife lesson. And I did take a lot of fife lessons, but I still am not a great fifist. But she did teach me, this was meant to be on the battlefield. This is not like a fun instrument.
I understand that, AJ.
All right. Hold on, I'm looking. I found both of my muskets. So
well, they're larger.
But I'm not allowed to fire that. I saw my socks, my belt. Sorry for the delay. I know it's in here. Somewhere. Can you hear me looking around?
And I think so can floor 12, 11, and 10.
Wow, I am having trouble finding it. Oh, I just stabbed myself with my quill. That really hurt. So you are making me work. All right, wait. I'm taking out. Oh, I have two more ideas. I'm sorry. Is this fascinating for your list? I found it.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. All right, here we go.
Right, give me a second.
Here we go.
Now, you're not going to get reveille so much as like one note or two notes.
That's fine.
But I'll do my best.
This is the excitement that's going to sell The Year of Living Constitutionally by A.J. Jacobs. All right, here we go.
How was that?
God bless America. Oh, I'm glad you found it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. It was worth the wait. No doubt.
AJ, you are the absolute best. The Year of Living Constitutionally, one man's humble quest to follow the Constitution's original meaning. It is out. It is available now. The book is so gosh darn good. I don't want to get in trouble. AJ, I appreciate it. The book's fantastic, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Elliot. And I am bothering you next time I come to D.C.
You better. I swear to God, you better.
All right. Love it.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks, AJ.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.